Welcome back to more Warhammer lore. In today's video, we will be covering the Lich Lord of the Tomb Kings, also known as the Grand Heirophant Khatep. As a disclaimer, I am pulling all of this information out of the latest Tomb King army book, because there is almost nothing, at least what I could find in my current Warhammer library, that involves Khatep in the fantasy novels, which I like to use to spice up the lore, which in the army books can be very bland, or simply not flushed out sometimes, and unfortunately, Khatep and the Lich Priests in general have a very mysterious and, well, honestly ambiguous origin in the lore. But enough with that, let's get into the lore proper and start off with what a Lich Priest actually is. Now, if you have not seen my previous Tomb King Society and the Tomb King's Mortuary Cult video, I would highly recommend checking those out before finishing this video, as I go into a much greater detail on what the Mortuary Cult is and what the Lich Priests are and what their function are in Tomb King Society. And the Grand Heirophant, just right now, is the head of the Mortuary Cult. He is the highest of the Lich Priests. There's only been a few over the centuries, but let's cut all that and let's get into what the Mortuary Cult actually is in a more compressed format for the layman. The Mortuary Cult was established by the one and only Settra the Imperishable as a means to conquer death. Settra did not think it was fair that he could not conquer all that he had beheld as was divine. His right as the uniter of the only civilized nation amongst the barbarians that only deserved the lash. Therefore, the best and brightest of Nehekhara and its conquered lands were brought together to find a solution to death so that Settra could rule his kingdoms for all eternity. Of course, this did not go exactly how Settra planned, and the cure for death would not be found in his own lifetime. However, despite the death of their patron, the Mortuary Cult still searched for the cure over death, and their skills over sorcery grew with each passing generation. The lives of the Lich Priests were significantly longer than an average human due to their studies, until finally, after 5 generations of Lich Priests, they ceased to die. You see, over the centuries, the Mortuary Cult developed a way of summoning a soul back from the realm of souls, which is essentially their version of the afterlife, and into their once mortal vessels. It was for this reason that the art of embalming was discovered, as they had yet to discover how to rejuvenate a corpse to its previous, livelier nature. This would in fact never actually happen, as the research was ground to a halt with the coming of Nagash, the great necromancer, and the last Hierophant, technically, of the Mortuary Cult. This is where the lore begins to kind of fade into ambiguity. It is said that there were 5 generations of Lich Priests. It is also true that there were 5 dynasties of Nehekharan royalty before the rise of Nagash, which in my mind puts the final generation of Lich Priests during the time of Nagash's rule. Now, this is not exactly written down, and the fluff kind of it's not very specific on what happens, but it makes quite a bit of sense to me that Nagash, being the head of the Mortuary Cult at the time, though he was a very selfish and very stingy man when it came to his sorcery and, of course, the invention of necromancy, it would make sense that during his time, many great discoveries would be made in the field of death, and during the 5th generation of Lich Priests, discovery was made of how to overcome death. The last and current Lich Priests ceased to die, so what happened is they bound their souls into their flesh, preventing them from passing into the realm of souls. So they technically didn't die, and they technically aren't alive either. It's kind of a catch-22, and Nagash is the same way. In a way, Nagash was the first, if we're going by chronological order. He was the first Lich to kind of embody that word, but I would like to say that these other Lich Priests followed in suit, and they may have come to it in a different way than him, but needless to say, the connection I'm trying to make is that Nagash actually facilitated this bridging of the gap into trapping your souls into your bodies and being able to conquer death in a kind of twisted way. And as I said, they did not die. The final Lich Priests just continued to live, but at the same time, their mortal forms withered away with the passage of time, despite the embalming techniques used to preserve themselves. And this is finally where we come to the story of the Grand Hierophant. Khatep, known as the Lich Lord, is the current Grand Hierophant of Khemri and the religious head of the mortuary cult's hierarchical council. Now, the way I picture this is that Nagash was ousted, obviously he was driven from the land, and then they just elected the next guy in line, which would have been Khatep. So technically he's part of the same dynasty as Nagash. This isn't written down verbatim, but it's just my assumptions and how I know the timeline works out, and that makes the most sense to me. So you could have your own opinions, and I could very well be wrong. Go ahead and leave them in the comments section if you think differently. So anyways, let's get back to it. Khatep is the oldest and wisest of all of the current Lich priests, and the first member of their order to truly deny death's embrace, if not the ravages of time. He is ancient beyond memory, cadaverous, and hunched over as if he carries the weight of epochs upon his shoulders. Following the casting of Nagash's great ritual, civil war threatened to destroy Nehekhara. Khatep therefore took it upon himself to restore order. He broke the magical seals of the Great Pyramid of Khemri and awoke the greatest of the Tomb Kings, Settra, the now unperishable. At the end of this mighty incantation, Settra rose and smote any who opposed him. Before long all bowed their heads to Settra, and though he sat once more upon the throne of Khemri, his wrath was great. Settra was angry foremost with the mortuary cult, believing they had whispered lies about the extent of their powers. In his fury, he exiled Khatep from Khemri and forbade him to set foot within any of the great cities until such a time as he could fulfill the mortuary cult's ancient promise and reinstate the golden age of Nehekhara. Thus Khatep wanders the desert in search of scrolls, inscriptions, and relics of power that he believes will restore his beloved kingdom to its former glory. Khatep roams the lands of the dead to this day, lending his aid to the Tomb Kings when he can. When King Deshek of Maharak battled with the lizardmen of the Southlands, their ferocity proved too great for his skeletal legions, as reptilian soldiers smashed through ranks of skeletons and towering war statues were hewn by powerful magics. Maharak stood on the brink of destruction. Then, through a whirling crowd of dust, a single figure appeared, and he intoned a single word that silenced the sorceries of the enemy. This stopped being, then raised his copper staff, and across the battlefield the broken bones of thousands of skeletons were once again whole. The lizardmen found themselves surrounded and outnumbered, and the sands were soon washed with their blood. Before King Deshek could greet the mysterious stranger, he had vanished back into the dust storm. This and 100 other such tales have been attributed to the Grand Heirophant Khatep, the Lich Lord of Khemri. And unfortunately, this short little lore blurb we get in the army book about the Grand Hierophant is really all there is on the Grand Hierophant. And to my current knowledge, he does not appear in any of the Warhammer novels, with possibly the exception of the End Times, but I am not ready to delve into those novels yet. So Khatep has found his way into Total War Warhammer, and is of course one of the legendary lords of the Tomb King faction. He is the straightforward caster lord, and is the first legendary lord in Total War that can be mounted on any kind of artillery piece, this being the mighty Casket of Souls. Of course, he also has access to a few of his tabletop items, the first of which being the Lich Staff. This ancient copper staff is inscribed with the names of all the gods and goddesses of the Nehekharan pantheon, and it grants Khatep mastery over their magical power. We do get to see the Lich Staff as a possible quest item, and it has a rather odd translation into Total War. You see, I would think that it would simply grant more winds of magic, or perhaps even an increased recharge rate, but it actually lengthens the cooldowns of enemy spellcasters by 15 seconds, which is actually rather significant as it does give this buff every time you cast a spell. So you can perpetually drain your opponent from the ability to cast any magic while the Grand Hierophant is on the field. And his other item from tabletop is the Scroll of the Cursing Word. This scroll curses those who utter vile sorceries, filling their mouths with dung beetles or replacing the air in their lungs with sorcerous sand. Now, we did not get the Scroll of Cursing Word, and honestly, I'm not quite sure we didn't, as it seems rather easy to implement. In fact, in my opinion, it should have the hexing effect that the Lich Staff does, but CA made the decision to perhaps wrap these up into one item, and it was more likely for balance reasons, I would assume, which usually that boils down to multiplayer balance issues, because for a single player experience, it really wouldn't matter how powerful the Lord is, because you can always overcome it through other means. And I think CA's done a very good job of implementing the Grand Hierophant in Warhammer. Not somebody I think I would have just picked out right off the bat, but as an inclusion in a 4-Lord pack, with the other 3 being very strong picks, I like his inclusion. He gives it a very different kind of feel, and he has a unique starting position up in the near Nagarond, essentially, kind of on the fringe of Nagarond and what would be Lustria, surrounded by Dark Elves and Lizardmen, which are very, very tough opponents for early Tomb King armies, for sure. And I do like the Grand Hierophant as an ideal character. I feel like he probably deserved a little more attention from GW, in that there's just not a lot on him, and I felt like I would have liked a few more stories to take place. Now, granted, he's not like a Arkan the Black. He's no Khalida. He's no, he's no Cetra. He's not one of these big names, but he is the Grand Hierophant, and so that does make him a very important character, and I feel like we should know more than we do. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but, beggars can't be choosers. And the thing I do like about him the most is he's kind of like that wandering samurai, that Ronin that's been banished from his lands by his liege lord, but yet he still does good whenever he can. And that's kind of the ideal I get when they were thinking about Khatep and who he is. And I think CA captured that perfectly. And with that, I am closing out this lore video on the Grand Heirophant Khatep. Unfortunately, there just is not a lot of lore in this guy, at least what I could find. He does strike me as a unique character, especially amongst the Tomb Kings, as he is essentially forever searching for the cure for death, promised by his patrons, but it is definitely going to be an eternal quest of penance from which he will never find the answers. And of course we know now that he definitely will never find the answers, since the end times happened. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for all future content. And I know this one's a little bit late, but man, if you have not heard already, I just recently had a child, so I've been dealing with that, and life just gets crazy sometimes. So if you like and subscribe, it really does help out the channel and lets me know that you guys are still interested in lore content. Also, if I've made any mistakes, and I definitely have made some pronunciation mistakes, so please forgive me. Or if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I will do my best to answer them to the best of my abilities. And sometimes if I don't answer them right away, that means I might be compiling them for my Q&A videos. So you should check out the Q&A videos if you hadn't. I have a playlist made with I just have 2 right now, and I take questions from comment sections and things like that and answer them in a Q&A kind of one-on-one style, so that you guys can kind of see all of those things, since a lot of people don't read the comment section. So there is that. And as always, guys, thank you guys oh so much for standing by my side, and I have been Jumbo Vic. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys all back very soon. Have a good day.